Welcome. This video is going to break down When We Two Parted by Lord Byron, the first poem in the Love and Relationships collection for AQA GCSE English Lit. I'm here to show you the crucial information that you need for the poem, and in the last section I'll reveal how you can interpret the poem in a number of different ways to allow you to build an argument and push up your grade. If you've seen this bit before, skip forward. I've put chapters below for easy navigation. Imagine this. You're sat in the exam hall. You read the poetry anthology question and it says, compare how poets present ideas about a theme in a named poem and in one other poem from the Love and Relationships collection. As you can see on the screen, I've tried very hard to blur out Sonnet 29. At that point, you need a system to compare so that you can quickly select the correct information and get on with the comparison. There's no point blindly trying to recollect everything you know about a poem. Instead, you want to learn the information in a set way to speed this up and allow you to show off your analytical skills. And that's what we're doing here. You'll see that I've broken down all of the poems by headings so that you can compare headings. By focusing on specific aspects of how the poems are written, you will be able to compare the methods the writer uses in any other poem. This reduces the cognitive overload when you are eventually sitting an exam. You've already learnt your essay plan, and so the comparison of poems will become a task when you are just selecting which bits of information you choose to compare. You may notice that I don't include a specific element on context. This is because in poetry, the exam board do not expect you to go away and learn the biographies of all 15 poets and then compare them. In fact, they say in their examiner's report that pursuing such avenues, meaning biographical information, often causes a student to lose focus on both questions and poems. The task is always compare how poets present an aspect of a relationship. So the ideas and perspectives of the poems are the context. The idea of love, the breakup of a relationship, strong emotions, sweeping a person along. All of these are the background information you need, and they come through in how the poets present their ideas. The exam board have been quite specific on this. If you answer the question, context will come with it. Traditionally, when we analyse poetry, we analyse form and structure and language. The first tab tells you what happens in the poem, what tones it creates, and it tells you the type of poem it is. The next two tabs deal with the structure and form of the poem. How the poem's start and ends is always worth comparing, as it gives us an idea of how the poet's perspectives may have changed, or what the poet intends to leave the reader with. The form points concerning rhyme and stanza structure are great if they help you analyse how the tone is achieved. Otherwise, you will end up with technique spotting. The last three tabs all cover language. Again, you need to use these to analyse how the tone is achieved. I will always give you a lead for this, so you will know what to say. Everything you see on screen, the words that pop up during the video are the things that we're learning. Ideally, this will be recorded in some way. How you do that is up to you. One way of doing it is to create a mind map for each poem, and I'll show you at the end how you might do that. If you're comfortable doing that straight away, you can use the 6 headings with icons as the branches for your mind map. The other crucial way to learn is to get the information on flashcards. I'll review that at the end as well and put everything you need to put on the flashcards on the screen, so you only need to pause the screen a few times to get the information on the flashcards rather than pausing every time I give you a quotation. This is very much a poem about the loss of love. The poem explores the pain of a broken relationship, comparing that pain to the experience of losing someone to death. Byron addresses the former lover directly. The tone is one of grief, and as such it varies from anger and bitterness to a silence. The speaker feels betrayed by his former lover's coldness and perceived promiscuity. The poem is a lyric poem, so it's his personal feelings about the breakup of a relationship. Many of the poems in this collection are lyric poems because poets tend to write about their own relationships as a way of exploring them. Some poets write in a dramatic monologue, and that allows them to explore more interesting personalities that may not truly reflect the way they feel as individuals. This poem, though, is an imagined elegy, which is a poem about someone who's passed away. Because the woman is still alive, that imbues the poem with dark tones. One side to a lyric poem is that by its nature it is one-sided. We therefore see Byron as the victim in the narrative since he's the one telling the story. It's also deeply personal and secret as a relationship, so the fact that Byron publishes it suggests he wants the reader to feel a certain way about him. The poem has a cyclical structure, meaning the end is linked to the beginning. The poet remains in silence and tears beyond the end of the poem, so it gives the effect that he's locked into this emotional state. The silence suggests he cannot speak due to the secrecy of his relationship or the pain at the end. So that's a useful point for us, as it allows us to explore different possible meanings. You could add in that it's also somewhat ironic saying silence, as he claims to be not able to articulate it while actually articulating it. He does claim to not be able to say it aloud. So this presents the poem as a kind of catharsis, a way of purging and cleansing, a moment where he is able to put the feelings together, but only on paper. The final word, tears, shows that only an emotional response is workable for him. Words cannot express how he feels. This is typical of romanticism in general, and Byron is generally considered the last of the great romantic poets, which, amongst other things, explored the inner emotional life as the one of true value and importance, rather than the cold world of science and reality. For Byron, it doesn't matter what reality is, it's how he feels about it that truly matters. There is a measured regularity in the stanza structure in contrast to his emotions. He uses octaves with the rhyming scheme of A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D throughout, suggesting an easy control, but his words say the opposite. The rhythm of the poem is complex and interesting, but the key information you need is that Byron writes with a set number of stressed or accented syllables rather than in an iambic meter. Here are lines 5 to 8, which contain 3, then 2, then 3, then 2 accented syllables. Pale grew thy cheek and cold, colder thy kiss. Truly that hour foretold sorrow to this. Obviously, I'm reading it in a way that pronounces the accented syllables more greatly, but you can see that this allows Byron to pick out the emotive words. The blame is put firmly on her emotional coldness, and this is where Byron finds his truth. If you feel that that's getting a little too lost in the finer details of poetic rhythm, and remember, you are trying to write an essay, or ultimately you will be trying to write an essay in 45 minutes at the end of this, comparing not one but two poems, you can use the shorter version, which is that the accents of the rhythm allow emphasis on words like tears, cold, and shame. Then you've got 3 words you can do a good and detailed analysis of. Before we get onto the language section, if you are finding this useful, please subscribe to help me bring more of these videos to you. When we talk about the main image, we are looking for the most important image of the poem. In this poem, Byron uses an extended metaphor, sometimes known as a conceit, and it is made up of funereal images. That's 3 different ways to say that Byron presents a relationship ending as a death. So the reader hears a knell to mine ear, and the word knell has connotations not just of a bell, but of solemnity, of funeral bells. He describes how, in silence, I grieve, suggesting the loss is desperately upsetting for him and will take time to get over. Notice that in both quotations there's a strong element of me from Byron. It's mine ear and it's I that grieve. So you can explore the use of personal pronouns attached to those quotations and how the story, the narrative itself, is very much one-sided. Byron uses the deathly imagery of pale grew thy cheek and cold, colder thy kiss, and the alliteration of the CK sound, which emphasizes and builds towards the word kiss, emphasizing how she has changed, how the symbolic coldness is emotional. She's effectively dead to him, and that is built from the word pale, suggesting the lifelessness, and every one of those harsh CK sounds acts like a further blow to him. Relationships are really about the metaphorical distance between people, so it's useful to look at how the language shows the distance between the speaker and his former lover. Here we see the distance between them as painful. Byron describes how the moment of the split will sever for years. The word sever suggests he loses part of himself, that it's been painfully and brutally cut off, and that by extension, he was whole when they were together, but now they have split. He's less than he was, less than he should be. He describes himself alliteratively as half broken-hearted, which suggests a part of him has died. If you wanted to build an argument about how to interpret the poem, the word half is not straightforward here. It's easy to take it on surface level, such as his half is half gone, and so he carries on the remains of his life, half broken, struggling through, able to go through the motions of life, but not able to fully live. You could also explore how half could suggest that they were never really in love, that he accepts her love was an illusion, and he now feels that she didn't love him back. His love was not reciprocated. Finally, you could argue that although he seems genuinely moved by the loss of the relationship, the fact that he's writing it suggests he actually wants her to read it, and that he's only half broken because actually he knows that his fame, his infamy, will not be broken by this affair, but hers may have been. Many will argue that the overriding feeling in the poem is grief, and we've already explored the funereal imagery connected to that effect. I mentioned at the start that I'd give you a way to analyse the poem that's going to push up your mark, so let's move on to that via the standard analysis of the poem, which is that Byron writes it to explore his feelings of grief at the end of a relationship. While I agree with that to an extent, there are a few extra layers we can add to that, and for me these make the poem much more interesting. If you really want your essay to stand out, you can focus on the blatant anger and rage in the poem and question whether it's justified. He feels anger for her. He feels betrayed that she called it off. Their secret affair was not a marriage, but he accuses her, saying, "Thy vows are all broken," placing the moral blame at her feet. We do not understand if he means her marriage vows were broken with him, or the promises that she made to him were also broken. We do not get to hear her side of the story by the nature of it being a monologue. He talks about hearing her name and how he must share in its shame. Now, the idea of shame is truly interesting. It implies doing something wrong, doing something you know is wrong, and getting caught and having to admit what you've done. It's that final element there, the element of things being public in the word shame. It involves the judgment of others. When he says share in its shame, it's perfectly possible to read the poem as his desire to increase her shame. You could argue, though, that he knew he was in the wrong. He knew she was a married woman. He knows that her reputation was at risk, not his, as he already enjoyed fame as a womanizer, and that he really writes the poem as a spiteful attempt to get rumours going about her. He publishes the poem to create gossip. Certainly, we can say that the poem did create gossip, to unsettle her new relationship. After all, how dare she dump him? And if I'm honest, that's why I enjoy the poem. It's morally ambiguous, it's cleverly written, and to me, that's more human than a straightforward love poem. Remember, Byron was a great poet, but people rarely say he was a great human being. Next steps. The best thing to do to get a picture of the whole poem is to create a mind map of it. Use the headings I've provided here and you'll have a 6-pronged mind map, which is crucial to know in advance of starting a mind map, as it's going to make spacing it out a whole bunch easier. I will always use the same heading, so you can keep making mind maps of the poems, keep the format the same, which is going to make comparing them a lot easier too. Please check out my video on creating mind maps if you're unsure how to make them. I've mocked up a template here though if you want to use it. If you're trying to learn quotations, and I really would for this poem, the most effective way is to get the individual bits of information on flashcards. I'm going to put the information on screen in a moment for what goes on each flashcard, and remember, they are two-sided, so that's why there are 2 columns. The cards need to be identified with the name of the poem, so you need to identify them in some way. I've put that in initials in the top corner. If you don't do that, you get confused when you add to the cards with quotations from other poems. The meaning side can be put in your own words if you wish, but don't use any of the same words as the quotation or term, or it will be too easy. I've worded the cards as having a desirable difficulty, a tiny bit of difficulty, so that when you turn them over, you can be precise about what you're learning. And if you don't get it 100%, remember you can't half know something. Making the flashcards is step one to learning them. So I'll link my video guide to making and using flashcards in the description. That gives you a guide to the lightness system, which concentrates your learning on the ones you don't know. So it's a really effective way of learning information quickly. I've used it to learn more stuff than I ever thought I could learn. So give it a go and you'll surprise yourself. I intend to do all the poems in this collection, so keep an eye out for the rest of them. You made it all the way to the end. Well done. Thank you. Make use of your flashcards, and I look forward to the next poem.